Bore da a croeso I gynhadledd heddiw. Good morning and welcome to today's conference. It's fantastic to see over 100 people in attendance here today. It's just a shame that we're not able to catch up around the coffee table. Firstly, I would like to say a big thank you to our sponsors today, Wales and West Housing, who have a proud history of providing supported housing, are involved in Housing First schemes here in Wales, and have taken action to reduce evictions into homelessness. We're very grateful for your support. This Housing First Wales conference comes at a critical point for the homelessness and housing sector in Wales. It's not been a quiet 18 months, with the Homelessness Action Group, a global pandemic and Senedd elections. The Homelessness Action Group's main report landed on the Minister's desk just days before the pandemic and provides us with a roadmap that can deliver significant and lasting change. It's critical that we all work together to make sure that these reports don't sit on a shelf and that we turn those recommendations into action. COVID-19 has certainly shone a light on the importance of home and the incredible work done by local authorities, housing and support services makes me prouder than ever to represent this sector. The Phase 2 work kick-started the transformation agenda, and it's critical that we secure settled homes and support for the people who've been previously failed by the system but are now in emergency accommodation and engaging with support. And of course, rapid rehousing is at the heart of the transformation of homelessness services, and Housing First is an integral part of this. And if the last year hadn't brought enough drama, we had the Senedd elections. I know many of us in the sector were watching the appointment of the new cabinet very closely. And despite the initial confusion about where homelessness would sit, I know my emotions went on quite a roller coaster that afternoon. I know that many of us were delighted to see Julie James return to the housing brief as part of a wider climate change portfolio. After showing really strong leadership during the pandemic and securing much needed investment for social housing and support services, we've been pleased to see the Minister reiterate her commitment to ending homelessness during this term, with promises for 20,000 social homes and fundamental reform of homelessness services in the programme for government. Despite her busier than ever schedule, and the small tasks of dealing with both homelessness and climate change during the Senedd term, we're delighted that the Minister has found time to be with us today. I'm really pleased to welcome Julie James, Minister for Climate Change, to share her vision for this Senedd term. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's so lovely to be here, and thank you for that accolade. I'm so delighted to be speaking to you today at the annual Housing First conference. And I just want to say something I know you all know, which is that Cymorth Cymru have been absolutely one of the key partners, and I want to extend my thanks once again to Katie and all the team for the work they're doing now and during the pandemic. You've all been such a crucial link between the Welsh Government and frontline services, and have been both a critical friend and a sound source of expert advice, always rolling up your sleeves, willing to help, continuing to help us to develop much of the guidance we've published this past 16 months. We certainly couldn't have done it without you. And, you know, before we move on, I also wanted to just quickly acknowledge the somewhat broader portfolio I have now since the election. You know, I'm obviously going to have additional demands placed in my time. And as I said slightly earlier than starting the speech, perhaps I should be careful what I wish for. But this is something that's been close to my heart for all my life, really. And I want to reassure everyone that housing and homelessness is absolutely front and center of that. There are huge benefits in the wider portfolio, you know, to help us develop sustainable communities in Wales, and that our communities do not exclude anyone, particularly those who've been or are homeless and in greatest need of housing. So before I say more on the rapid rehousing work, I do think it's important to acknowledge the extraordinary work of all partners during the pandemic. Over 10,000 people have been supported into temporary accommodation since last March, and huge credit should go to the local authorities and the wider sector for such a phenomenal response. I know how vital a component the Local Authority Hardship Fund has been in this, and I'm pleased to confirm that additional funding has been allocated to the fund to continue the homelessness emergency response for the remainder of this financial year. Given this context, some of you might be thinking, is now the right time to be embarking on such a transformative journey? But it's, you know, it's the best time to do it, isn't it, really? Perhaps for the first time ever, we now know the true scale of homelessness challenge in Wales. We've seen the relationships between services and partners improve immeasurably, and crucially, all services throughout Wales have begun the cultural journey required to swap to the new system. And I've said it absolutely so many times, and I'll say it again now, there will be no going back. The pandemic will be the launch point for the development of services that will provide the necessary help to everyone in need, and we must not and we cannot let all the magnificent work of the past 16 months go to waste. I'm sure by now you'll have all picked up the key objective within the new programme for government, which confirms our commitment to deliver a fundamental reform of homelessness services to ensure a focus on prevention and rapid rehousing. A small line in the programme for government, but a hugely complex objective which will require changes across the housing spectrum, as well as other key services such as health, social care, criminal justice. I want to develop the Welsh model for rapid rehousing in partnership with you as service providers and with the people who have lived experience of homelessness. We are rightly proud of the impact the Housing Wales Act has had in helping to prevent and alleviate homelessness since it was implemented in 2015, but we have seen that there is much that has not quite had the impact we imagined. Firstly, 56 days is not prevention. 56 days is crisis point, and our rapid rehousing reforms need to ensure that there is an increased focus on solving problems and issues at source before they grow into issues that require more support and potentially leave a lasting trauma on individuals. We absolutely have to move away from the staircase model of earned rewards and the language of tenancy ready and adopt a system of supporting people to move to sustainable, settled accommodation as quickly as possible and with as few different forms of accommodation as necessary. There is enough Housing First evidence globally which tells us conclusively that almost everyone can be supported into settled accommodation with the correct level of support, and that even some of the most complex individuals can maintain their accommodation 2 or 3 years later. Currently, lots and lots of hard work and support goes into stabilising people while they're in temporary accommodation, only for it to collapse the moment that someone is asked to move into different accommodation, be it temporary or settled. But we all know that rapid rehousing isn't just about quickly moving people through. It is about accurately assessing a person's support needs and the wishes of that individual and developing a truly tailored response. Many people will require or request longer stays in different forms of temporary accommodation, and each case will need to be considered individually. But for most, we need the system to be focused on supporting and stabilising people in their own home at the earliest possible point and increasing the likelihood of it being sustained for the long term and not the short term. My officials and I understand the scale of the challenge, particularly in relation to stock challenges across Wales. Rapid rehousing must be adopted wholesale across the full spectrum of housing. For this approach to become a success, it must be endorsed and supported by social and private sector landlords, housing support grant funded support organisations, and health and social care services. We all know that homelessness is a reflection of structural failures and the life pressures that many households face, which have become overwhelming. Rapid rehousing is intended to solve the housing problem and provide a settled, stable environment to address the health, financial, and wider factors that have overcome a person or household. We've recently launched a policy paper on rapid rehousing, which sets out our vision, but I just wanted to reinforce some of the key messages. We absolutely want rapid rehousing to adopt some of the key principles of Housing First, namely principles such as putting the individual at the centre of their support, ensuring their voice is heard, and understanding what will or won't work for them. We also want to ensure all services are more resilient and continue to provide support to individuals, even when tenancies break down or their behaviour would have previously led to discharge of the duties they are owed under our housing legislation. This way of working in a trauma-informed way will be absolutely critical in adopting rapid rehousing. We must remove any judgment and focus solely on helping the individual and reduce significantly the chances of excluding people from services. And while we expect some of the principles of Housing First to be adopted for all services, we must resist the temptation to dilute our existing Housing First services in the face of additional demand. In order to fully implement rapid rehousing, we must work to build enough capacity so that every person who needs an intensive service, such as Housing First, can access it. Failure to do this will inevitably lead to some of Wales's most vulnerable citizens left without a service that can address their needs. So as a result, we believe Housing First must be seen as the standard bearer for rapid rehousing and holds a key and prominent position within the spectrum of services. This is why I'm fully supportive of the Housing First Network's accreditation process. It isn't merely about deciphering who is and isn't following the principles of Housing First. It's about placing a deserved spotlight on our best projects in Wales. This in turn can support other projects to achieve similar levels of sustainability that we know a Housing First project with full fidelity can achieve. It goes without saying that we have had to face challenges across all areas of the housing regeneration portfolio that we could not have foreseen 2 years ago. And I'm so proud of the way we've risen to the challenge in Wales, both in terms of all your incredible hard work, but also in terms of assuming our moral responsibility and in terms of demonstrating that we can work collectively collaboratively and innovatively. And it's that same willingness to collaborate and innovate that we will need to continue if we are to make the transformation to rapid rehousing and create a system and services that work for every single member of our society. I'm sure that despite the size of the challenge, we can all step up to and deliver a truly inclusive homelessness services for everyone. And I'm so grateful for your help as we go forward with this. Diolch.
Thanks very much, Minister. And it's so great to hear, you restate that important ambition that you set out last year, and coming into government despite the many challenges you have in ending climate change alongside the homelessness brief. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, if that's okay. So first of all, you've talked about homelessness not just being a housing issue, that it requires action across all government departments and public services. How confident are you in the rest of your cabinet colleagues being committed to kind of playing their part, and ensuring that other public services across Wales are able to contribute to the goal of ending homelessness?
Yeah, so I'm very confident, really, because first of all, we have a system of working that started in the pandemic, and out of the crisis comes a renewed sense of purpose across the services that pull together so well. And secondly, the new ministerial team is determined to make it happen. So I've already spoken with Eluned Morgan and Lynn Eagle and Julie Morgan about how those services can pull together to help us. They're all keen and ready to go with that. We all see this as a fundamental challenge to improving both the health and the sustainability of our community. So I'm absolutely certain that the leadership and will is there, and we need to make sure that we get good feedback from all of you about where the barriers are, what the hurdles are, so that we can clear them out of the way and make sure it still works.
Brilliant. Thank you, Minister. And we're currently conducting some research about how Housing First is working with mental health and substance use services, to try and inform that kind of progress of that partnership and try and make things a bit more systemic rather than based on passionate individuals making things happen, which is so often the case in partnership working. Something else that you touched on and has been a really key factor, particularly during the phase 2 response to COVID, is both within Welsh Government and within local authorities, the capital teams working alongside the kind of homelessness policy teams. That's going to be absolutely critical with the rollout of rapid rehousing, isn't it? Because we're not able to move people quickly into permanent accommodation unless the social housing is there. And I guess the right social housing in the right places of the right kind. So what's your kind of thoughts really on the capital and policy sides continuing to work together and the importance of that?
No, it's absolutely crucial, exactly as you say, Katie. I mean, there are lots of different kinds of housing crisis around Wales. We have different kinds of challenges in different parts of Wales, but all of them require the right housing to be built in the right place for the fundamental solution. It's the solution to every. So you'll have seen a lot of discussion in the media and in the government around the issue around empty houses, second homes, holiday accommodation in some of the most beautiful parts of Wales, with a rapidly escalating price on market housing. Well, that's a different crisis for young people who cannot get any kind of rented accommodation or anything else. That will inevitably feed the homelessness agenda unless we do something about it. So, there are a number of things that we need to do, but fundamentally the way out of all of those things is to build the right kind of excellent, beautiful social housing across Wales that people will be proud to have in their community and proud to access. I mean, that's, in the end, that's the solution. But it is absolutely about building the community, not just the house.
Thank you, Minister. And on specifically the subject of Housing First, we've seen, an increase in the number of Housing First projects, but it's not in all parts of Wales. Would you kind of want to see that continued expansion and to make sure that a Housing First model is in operation in all local authorities for the people who do need that intensity of support?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely, definitely. It's once you're at the sharp end of homelessness, that's your route back, isn't it? So we need to do both things. We need to do the prevention work so people don't fall into homelessness in the first place. And the whole issue around, 56 days was not a sort of go away and come back in 56 days attempt. It was meant to be, come in good time, and that's the crisis point. It hasn't quite worked like that across Wales. So we need to readdress that, because we need people to be given the help to stay where they are in their secure housing if they have it. But of course, once they've fallen out of that, then we need to put all the services in place to get them back into into it, because we know that both on a human level, obviously, it's a terrible trauma to go through, but actually just if you were a really hard-hearted financial person, you could see the sense of it, because homelessness is a really expensive way of running a society, and, you know, there's nothing good to be said about it. So absolutely, we have to do that. Absolutely.
Thank you. Lynn submitted a question, I guess linked to that. Is there a commitment to bolstering the resources for current rapid rehousing services, specifically for the people in temporary accommodation? Because I guess what we've seen, you know, in some ways a silver lining is that what previously was hidden homelessness, we now have a much better picture of as a result of the pandemic. But for a lot of those people, been failed by systems before, haven't necessarily been able to engage. And how important is it that we've got the right resources and the right support there to make sure that those people don't return to the streets and move on to permanent accommodation?
No, absolutely right, Katie. So we were really pleased to be able to put the amounts of money we were putting into the system up last time. We've managed to sustain that this budget year. I mean, I've got still the problem that the UK government is funding us on a rolling 1-year basis. So we would very much like to, you know, put the thing on a 3 to 5 year basis so you guys could all plan. And, you know, we're driving the kind of short-term contract culture that we most don't like with some of the ways that we're doing things. But we're also caught in a system where, you know, the current UK government has been promising a comprehensive spending review. I don't know, it seems to me like for a decade, and it's never come. We're promised another this year. That's supposed to put us onto a 3 to 5 year footing, which would be great, wouldn't it? So we could plan that out. But at the moment, of course, we have no idea what next year's budget looks like for the Welsh Government either. But I can reassure you by saying that this is absolutely front and centre of the things that we know need doing. So, you know, in the scramble for resources, you're right up there at the top of the pile.
Well, that's heartening to hear, because I know that that kind of annual budgeting has a real impact on services, both in terms of like staff retention. Obviously, you know, staff are worrying about paying their own rent when they're not sure when contracts are ending, and particularly with Housing First, where the support is not supposed to be time limited. You know, in reality, it's very difficult to feel that assurance when the annual budget's there. So yes, we look forward to, as you say, you know, hoping for the UK government to give a longer term settlement so that you can give local authorities and providers that longer term settlement. Moving on to the private rented sector, because of course social housing is incredibly important, but we need to make use of all types of tenure. Someone said we still have private landlords refusing tenants who are in receipt of benefits. Are there any plans to deal with this?
So, I mean, this is really frustrating for us because I don't have all the levers, unfortunately. So the fundamental law of property isn't devolved to Wales. So although housing is, there's always a bit of an argument between us and the UK government about which bits we can do what about. So our approach, therefore, has been to try and work with the private rented sector. Well, you saw we've put the tenancy support grants in place now to help the people most affected in the pandemic. And no doubt we'll have to have some iterations of that before we get it quite right. We've been working with Registered Landlords Association, NRLA. They changed their name just to confuse me, I think, National Registered Landlords Association, to try and get out to their members the knowledge that we will help the tenants rather than evict them, you know, make sure that they know how to get the support and so on. And as you know, Katie, we've also been rolling out a programme across Wales, which will go Wales-wide now, to ask private sector landlords to consider giving their houses over to the management of the local council or RSL in return for us bringing the house up to EPCC standard, eventually EPCA standard, and them receiving the local housing allowance, you know, without interruption all the time for the whole period. And I'm really keen on pushing that as well. The vast majority of landlords in Wales only have one house, and what they want is a decent income from it and no hassle. So actually we've been really trying to push that because that allows us to give security in the private rented sector as well as elsewhere. And you're absolutely right, without the private rented sector, we have a real problem.
Absolutely agree. And I think those PRS leasing schemes will be incredibly important. So another question, the Social Care Fair Work Forum is looking forward to hearing the Welsh Government plans for implementing the real living wage for social care staff in Wales. Back in April, we were really pleased to hear that you say that homelessness and housing support staff would be included in that commitment. Do you have any kind of further updates or that, or simply to restate that homelessness and housing support staff will absolutely be included in that commitment?
Yes, just to restate it at the moment, we're still working on how to roll that out, but we're absolutely committed to it. I'm also committed, I said at an earlier conference this week where a number of you will have been, I'm sure, that we're very committed to making sure that we professionalise the service as well. So we give people a career path and a recognised qualification trail as well. And I'm really happy to work with the sector to figure out what that should look like and how we should give people access to it through, personal learning accounts and a number of other things that we're introducing as well, because all of those things are important. So people feel valued both through their wage packet, which is very important, but actually just through their kind of professional career development as well.
Definitely. And, that was a big topic of discussion at the Housing Support National Advisory Board just a couple of days ago, and has come up repeatedly in our frontline network meetings with frontline workers who, are really in support of that work going forward. So that's great. A quick question. Can we expect legislative change to accompany the fundamental reform of homelessness services that's in the programme for government? So we know that you had a report on things like priority need pre-pandemic, that you've talked about not going back, having given some guidance on how to interpret priority need and vulnerability during the pandemic. So is that in your plans?
Yes, it certainly is. We need help with that. There's absolutely no doubt. So we have both to develop a new housing system for Wales and a new housing act for Wales. So we'll be putting a green paper out and asking for help. So, by the end of this 5-year Senedd term, I hope to have got that act into place and have fundamentally changed the landscape. But also, Katie, I don't want a gap. I don't want to go back in between and then have to restart. So we have to find ways of, limping the system along until we can get the legislative framework in place. So I've been really clear culturally, we are not going back to gatekeeping, but I have to find mechanisms to allow us to do that legally and to enforce that through the local authority systems. And, we're basically, as you know, we've asked the advisory group to help us with that. And frankly, anyone else out there who knows how to do it, I'd be grateful to hear from.
That's a good call to action to everyone. We've had another question in where the Welsh Government does have a strong potential influence is providing guidance or instruction to local authorities. Will the Welsh Government become more directive to local authorities in regard to the direction it is seeking? Now, knowing you, Minister, I know how directive you've already been, but I don't know if you want to comment on how you're going to continue being directive with local authorities.
Yes, so I've already met once with the network of housing cabinet members across Wales and the WLGA to start it's hard to mind here as well. It's not about me just commanding people. It's about, getting them to come along that journey with us and for us to understand the pressure in the local authority, why they feel the pressure to do what they do, and to make sure that goes all the way down through the system. So, we've got the political leadership on board, but how's that translated into operational points in Housing First, homelessness services and all the rest of it? So again, we rely on you. So I'm, very keen, Katie, and I know it's a role that you're happy to play, for you to tell me what's wrong with the system. So that, because one of the real problems about being a minister is everybody talks about talking truth to power, but then they don't. And so I'm really encouraging people to say to me, look, we know that you'd like the system to work like this, but it doesn't. So, and these are the issues. What can we do about it? And so I'll be working with the leadership in local authorities to make sure that they're on board, which they are. I've had no pushback from that, but then to get it down through the culture of the authority. And you guys who are working there on the front line, you can tell me how that's going, and we can take that up with individual local authorities. So it'll be a mixture, won't it? We will put the guidance out. We will put the performance data out. We changed the way that local authorities will be judged for their performance in the last Senedd term. So that will be helpful. But in the end, what we want is for people to be on board with this and want to do it, because that's when you get the best services.
Absolutely. And that we will continue to speak truth to power in a very blunt and robust way when necessary. So you can always count on us for that. So I guess finally, before we just move on to the accreditation, your message really to the sector. We've got people here from the sector support providers, people from housing associations and people from local authorities. And I guess, you've said a little bit about, we all need to kind of work together if we're going to achieve the vision that you've set out. So just the kind of final message to the people here today, really, about the next 5 years.
Well, just to say, as I said at the beginning, Katie, look what we've done in a year. So when we got the Homelessness Action Group report, you know as well as I do that we were talking about an implementation period of 3 to 5 years and all the rest of it. And I think we did it in 12 weeks. So, you know, it was extraordinary times, I know, and we had some opportunities that we don't normally have and so on. But my goodness, look what we can do when we think it can be done and needs to be done. So, you know, we just need to keep thinking this needs to be done. It can be done. It can be done. And we need to work together to identify and overcome each of the barriers in our way until we get to where we want to be. And I'm really happy to work with you while we try to do that.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, having worked with people in this sector for the past 9 or 10 years, I know the passion and the determination to make real change happen. I guess particularly for our local authority colleagues, there is sometimes a capacity issue with all the things they're being asked to do. So I guess anything from Welsh Government to support increasing that capacity and making sure they've got the resources to kind of do the job. And a call out to support providers and housing associations, support your local authorities. You know, this is the big chance to make things happen. So please do roll up your sleeves, work together, and I'm sure that we can make, you know, really significant and lasting change here. Fantastic, Minister. Thank you so much for sticking around and answering questions. We know some ministers historically like to come in and do their speech and then run away very quickly before answering questions, but we're always grateful for your honesty with the sector. Just before you go, we'd like to invite you to announce the awarding of the accreditation, the second accreditation that we're awarding after a really rigorous, robust process over a number of months to the Salvation Army's Housing First project in Cardiff. So if I could ask Kath to join us on screen and then ask the Minister to make the announcement. Thank you.
Oh, so lovely to see you, Kath, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to present another Welsh Housing First Accreditation Award. The accreditation, as everyone has said, is needed now more than ever, perhaps, to ensure the longer-term integrity of the model and to make people work towards that best practice model, you know, and I'm sure you'll want to be the Pathfinder role model. I know you already are. I'm really confident that we can use this tool to drive up the standards across Wales and to maintain fidelity to the model. So following what I know was a really grueling and detailed assessment process, I'm so delighted to say that Cardiff Salvation Army project led by Kath Docherty has successfully passed and is the second recipient of the Housing First Network Wales accreditation. My personal thanks to Kath, to you and Yvonne for your work in leading the project. It was one of my very first visits when I became a housing minister. I was so impressed, not just by the staff I met, but the impact the project had on Chris, who was one of the people I met that day, who was an amazing individual and just made your heart soar, really, with what was possible. So my thanks to the whole team who are so important in providing the personal support that's a key feature of Housing First. And of course, my thanks to the network and Cymorth for developing the accreditation system, and especially Alex, who I understand has undertaken the majority of the heavy lifting, and the panel itself for working through the process in a robust manner. Because when you win this, you know that you've really won something worth having because of the robust process that you've gone through. So I'm so chuffed to be able to give it to you, Kath, and feel free to invite me back anytime now that you've got it too.
Thank you so much. How exciting for us. I just wanted to say a massive thanks, obviously, to Cymorth for helping us to take part in this process, and thank you, Julie, for presenting us with this certificate today. And lovely that you remembered spending such an incredible time with us. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I hope in true Salvation Army fashion we provided enough tea, coffee and biscuits on that day, as it is something we're thankful for. So yeah, just thank you so much again. It's just incredible to receive this award, obviously on behalf of my team, and most importantly on behalf of the clients who we support, and the incredible achievements that they've made on their journey with us as a project. So yeah, just thank you again on behalf of myself, my team, our clients and the Salvation Army.
Congratulations, Kath, absolutely fantastic. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Minister. We're so pleased that you could join us today. I hope you have a good rest of the day tackling climate change, and we hope to see you very soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure. See you again soon. Bye now. Bye.
Brilliant. Okay, so moving swiftly on to the next part of this session, I'd like to invite Alex and Yvonne to join us. Fantastic. So you've heard the Minister's speech, you've seen the accreditation being awarded to Kath. Congratulations again, Kath. And this session is an opportunity for you to hear a little bit about the process, both from the perspective of Kath and Yvonne, and from the perspective of Alex, who, as Kath said, and the Minister undertook quite a lot of the work for this process over a period of months. So thank you again, Alex, for all of your hard work on this. So we'll start off with Kath and Yvonne. Congratulations, Kath and Yvonne. You must be absolutely delighted with the accreditation.
Yeah,
we did practice who would speak first.
Yeah, we are, Katie. As I said, we are absolutely delighted today to receive the accreditation. It's just incredible for our achievements to be recognised in delivering a Housing First project that's really authentic to the principles of the model, and most importantly, that's delivering a service that's really high quality and really keenly person focused. As I said, it recognises the incredible and enduring work of my team, the amazing achievements of the clients who've been with us on this journey, and ultimately now are leading lives that are safer and happier in homes of their own, which is, really it's the essence of what we were hoping to deliver.
Yeah, Kath says it all beautifully and does it all beautifully. So I think I also really need to recognise Kath in this. And when we started this, I think it's a really important reflection that there was nothing there. There was no footprint. There was no template. So Kath, this is real blue sky thinking from Kath and the team to how do we make it work. And if there was a hurdle ever, every day there was a hurdle, and Kath's approach to going, well, how do I get round this? Or some of our approaches is how do I actually walk through this? It's just been phenomenal. So for me, I just want to also recognise Kath and say this is a wonderful achievement for Kath. I think it's a really important reflection of a lady who works incredibly hard for her team and for clients, way above and beyond. And our sector's full of people like Kath as well. So for me, well done, Kath, and also a big thank you to Cymorth, who and Alex in particular, who I think this was a mountain of work, in all honesty. But has really reflected the hard work and the value of the work that's done. So thank you, but massive personal thank you to Kath and her hard work.
Definitely, and those of us who know Kath know her passion for this area, and so pleased to be awarding the accreditation today. And we weren't sure whether you would be thanking us after the months of rigour that we've put you through, so that's always good. And so Kath, Yvonne, could you tell us a bit about your experience of going through the accreditation process? We've talked about it being rigorous, we've talked about it taking place over a number of months, but kind of what was your experience of it? And if you could share a bit of that, particularly for organisations who are thinking about going through it in the future.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I would say the accreditation, it was a really great experience and process overall. It gave me a really good opportunity to kind of reflect upon the journey that I've been on, and the growth that we've made as a service, not just in terms of like the number of clients that we support, but more importantly, the journey that we've been on in terms of our learning. Like kind of Yvonne touched on, we began life as a 5-unit, small little project supported by Welsh Government back in June 2017. In the beginning, it was literally me, a handful of clients that I'd known for a long time, and a lot of determination. And this year, we're now looking to deliver up to 30 units of support for people. Which is incredible. I have an amazing team, and it's wonderful as well to see all of our original clients still living successfully in their homes 3 years later. Another really lovely part of the accreditation was being able to look to our partners to provide insight as well and feedback on how we've travelled with them. The relationships we have with providers across housing, health, the criminal justice system, fundamentally they are key to our delivery. We could not do it without them. So them being able to share in the process as well was fantastic. It was really wonderful to have Alex and to have the panel be genuinely curious about what we're doing as well. And it helped me to think more closely and more creatively about the steps that we take to deliver the project, and also how I then evidence that to Alex. So yeah, for me, I would say it was lovely to spend lots of time with Alex, and all around a really positive experience.
Yvonne, did you have anything to add to that?
Probably not. Kath is so good in her responses, but I think for me it was really heartening also to add into this to hear the First Minister talk about not diluting. And we do work in services and sectors that often build something that really works and then get asked to do it cheaper. So I think for me also it's a real recognition, and that's really clear in Alex's report about the quality and actually, what it delivered on a wider social return. So I think for us, it provides us with a template to perhaps maybe extend that piece of work to be able to report on the wider social return of Housing First. So that's also really been helpful to us. Thank you.
Brilliant. And I'm seeing a load of people in the chat congratulating you. People are absolutely delighted for you. And Carl from Welsh Government saying very well deserved. And we've also published the accreditation report in the chat as well. So if anyone does want to look at that and find out a bit more about the process in more detail, please do click on that link in the chat. Alex, this has taken up an extraordinary amount of your time. You're so thorough, you're so rigorous with going through all of the documentation, the policies, the procedures, and then interviewing everyone under the sun connected to the project, because it's really important to get that confidence around the evidence levels, isn't it, from the different perspectives. So, thank you from me and Cymorth for the extraordinary amount of work that you've done to contribute towards this and give people confidence in this project. This is the second project that's been through the accreditation process. So how have you found the experience? How is the accreditation process developing?
Before I answer that, Katie, I should just also thank my Cymorth colleagues who carried out some of the interviews and were kind of involved in a lot of the processes. And to mention that I obviously spoke to a lot of very thoughtful, insightful members of staff at Salvation Army Cardiff, including Kath. Spoke to some great clients as well, but also some of the external bodies and individuals that the project works with, like the housing associations with whom they work. Really interesting and thoughtful things to say, and a real kind of understanding of what Housing First is and can be. So I just wanted to make sure that we kind of mentioned all those people too, and of course they're mentioned in the report as well, so I'd encourage people to read that. In terms of some of the things that have changed or developed, as you say, this is the second accreditation we've done. There were some sort of clear lessons from my conversations with Sue from Comrie Denbighshire, who I think I've seen in the chat from the first process. I remember Sue mentioning that the fact that there was like a clear point of contact between me and her, and that clear working relationship was really important. So obviously we kind of took that forward, and I made sure that I updated, or I tried to update Kath as much as I could, and so on. Also the importance of kind of choice and control, which is obviously one of the principles, but that concept being at the heart of Housing First and so much of the other stuff that Housing First is. So I made sure that in interviews and in the report and so on, we kind of made sure that had the time spent on it that it merited. In practical terms, speaking about some of the things that have just been said in terms of, now's the time to be transformational and not dilute, which we've heard the Minister and Yvonne say there. This accreditation was done 99.99% during the COVID pandemic. Okay, I remember Kath had sent me some documents, before that, but the bulk of the work, the absolute majority of the work, was done in a kind of lockdown scenario. And while it was kind of a shame that I couldn't meet some of the clients and the staff in the same way, I'd say that for anyone who is kind of thinking, oh, is this the right time to do lots of extra work in terms of an accreditation, or, I'd say it absolutely is. And this is the time we need to make sure Housing First is working well. And this shows that can be done. And obviously it's a lot of work to do at the best of times, but we did this during COVID. We adapted and we got it done. So I think that if Salvation Army Cardiff can do it, that's a really good kind of reassuring message for other projects. And finally, the panel meeting is always, you know, they're going to be different every time. It's different people most of the time, and kind of different discussions and things come up. So, for example, in this one, you know, lots of stuff to take to the Housing First network itself, and it's great that obviously Kath is now chairing that group, so we can really make sure we discuss some of these things, like some of the ideas around gender-informed work and kind of active inclusivity that was really interesting. We'll be taking to the network, and some practical stuff like where we take the ideas around where we take the accreditation next, like maybe a framework around some of the principles to just make the process a bit more clear and smooth for participating projects from early on. So lots of ideas, but, you know, lots of differences, but, you know, they're all going to be different, and they're all going to have lots of interesting things that come out, and you know, it's just a really enjoyable process for me.
Thanks very much, Alex. We've had a question in the chat about could we look at what is required for the accreditation process. If you follow the link that Cymorth has pasted on the chat, that'll take you to a page on our website and the accreditation report. And the first section of that report describes the different stages of the accreditation process. So do take a look at that. And obviously, please get in touch with Cymorth if you'd like to discuss accreditation. We'd be really keen to talk to you about that and plan it in if you're keen to be accredited. So to Kath and Yvonne, what do you think you've learned from this process? And, you know, are there any kind of changes or improvements that you've made as a result of going through this process?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think kind of touching on some of the conversations I've had with Alex, some of the topics that Alex has just raised in his response, it's particularly helped us to kind of start to kind of shift our conversations and our focus to how we can be more accessible to everybody in the homeless community, you know, particularly looking at kind of women, individuals from BAME communities, LGBTQI plus people. So some of the things on the ground that we've been doing post accreditation is that we've been focusing on training staff in these areas and kind of supporting more openly the diversity that already exists within our own team. We recently attended a really exciting conference hosted by Homeless Link, which was around anti-racism and inclusivity in the homeless sector. And that just gave us some incredible food for thought, which we're going to take forward locally in terms of looking at our own inclusivity kind of like guidance. We've also reached out on a local level to the Terence Higgins Trust to try and start to engage in some specialist training around empowering and giving confidence to individuals who are struggling with their sexuality and their sexual identity, because that's something that we experience a lot in projects and something that we want to be more equipped to help some of the individuals that we work with to kind of find their own power, I suppose. And we really, on a really, really basic level, we've really honed in on doing more of what we already do really well as well, refreshing all our diversionary activities and making sure that those diversionary activities meet our kind of changing pathway out of lockdown and what our clients want to do. We recently created a beautiful craft space at Crichton House. So we've got clients engaging in all sorts of fun stuff there, clay, colouring, whatever they want to do. And we were also looking at taking on an allotment, which I'm particularly excited about. So that's just another opportunity, again, for our guys to explore activities that will help them to feel nurtured and help to improve their well-being. I think kind of a final thing from me, I suppose, before I hand over to a much more eloquent Yvonne, is thinking about, I suppose, how our project fits in terms of the wider kind of picture of supporting people. You know, the accreditation, I suppose, for me on a personal level has made me kind of better understand the wider context of Housing First, particularly how Housing First helps us to achieve, you know, some of the areas the Minister was talking about earlier in terms of, you know, having a home that is right for all and appropriate housing. So, yeah, you know, Housing First, more than anything else, it creates safety and it creates stability and it provides a massive social return on investment as well, you know, in terms of supporting the guys that we, the individuals that we work with to kind of reduce contact with various other agencies, including criminal justice and health. I think overall Housing First creates a better balance of like equity for everybody, and you would hope that in time it helps people to feel more included and for communities to feel safer. And I think by being part of this process and being able to have this conversation with Cymorth and with Julie James, it really does kind of open up my perspective on exactly the power that Housing First can have.
And we had a really interesting discussion, didn't we, Kath, with the panel about how when you're kind of doing outreach on the streets, you get a predominantly male kind of population engaging with the outreach and therefore the Housing First process. And then, we were thinking about other ways where we could, build relationships with specialist Valder SV organisations, or look at other ways that women might be more likely to engage to increase that. So that was, for me, one of the really interesting conversations. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, particularly in the beginning, it was so fresh and so new. It was like, right, let's just get outside and see who we find. We kind of knew, potentially who some of the clients could or would be. And actually now, as we journey and the projects get bigger and become more numerous, we do, I think, really need to cast a closer eye on how we reach those target groups in the homeless community who you might not necessarily see out on the streets. So, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. And we've got a Housing First for Women session at the end of today, where we'll be hearing from both someone from the UK and someone from the US of A about how they're delivering Housing First for Women. So really exciting session. Yvonne, did you have anything to add about the kind of, learning and improvements from your experience of the accreditation?
I feel like I should have a poster that says what Kath said. Should have prepared. I should have really prepared. But I think everything that Kath said, there's also some learning about how we recruit. And actually, the sort of kind of the people coming into our services to support. So Housing First for us, we've moved totally to values-led recruitment processes and really looking at having a much wider catch in terms of those that would be attracted to the sector, and sort of kind of aligning that a little bit better. I think the two things also for me, sort of kind of more strategically, is one, Housing First has been allowed to develop as a living learning culture. And I think as we move forward, as someone representing a big supported accommodation provider who really is ambitious about responding to what Wales wants, but actually it's about recognising that doing things at the right pace in the right way, even with a pandemic, actually is the right way to do it, as opposed to a sort of kind of very quick transition. So, and also for me, when I look at maybe some of the different Housing First projects we deliver, both in Wales and nationally, I know my colleagues from Scotland are here today, is that Housing First should really be a very place-based response. And, Wales, we live in a country where homelessness does look different in different areas. And I think in particular around my learning is actually getting a team, as Kath did, on the ground that slowly works to work out what is needed in that area. What does it look like? Who are the main partners? What are the things that are sort of kind of missing? And I think that's important as well within recognising an accreditation process. It's actually also about making sure that things have the ability to be very localised and have a localism agenda. That can better fit with those existing systems, because the system, say in Cardiff, is not going to be the system in probably somewhere like Powys. They're going to look different. And I think that's definitely a learning point for me, whereas we've previously gone and having a one-size-fits-all outcome monitoring framework and all of those things. Actually, we need the flexibility to have services that are place-based in terms of their responses and their identity.
That's a really brilliant point. Very well made, Yvonne. Thanks for those reflections. And I think that'll be, those reflections a lot of people will take away and have a think about after today's event. Alex, going back to you, what struck you most about the Housing First Cardiff project when you were undertaking the accreditation?
One thing I just wanted to highlight is the fact that some of the things that Kath mentioned that the project is doing in response to the accreditation. I've seen a huge list of these things that Kath has shared with me. I'm sure she could have spoken for a lot longer about those if we had the time. And to me, that just speaks to the drive to kind of reflect at the project and sort of improve practice. And that's really what the accreditation is about. And just to capture some of that stuff, I mean, what we've done with the first accreditation is do a follow-up report a few months down the line. So I'll obviously be talking to Kath about doing something like that so we can kind of see some of this great work develop. In terms of what kind of struck me about sort of the project as I was going through this process, in addition to, it kind of almost seems obvious that they're doing a great job, a great practice, supporting people really well, a real dedication to supporting clients in the best way possible, and we're hearing that in the things that we've just heard said. A strong alignment with the principles, but kind of specifically, as I've already sort of touched on, I got a real sense of staff challenging themselves and reflecting. There's an example in the report of I can't remember if it was Kath or not, but there was a client who just didn't want to sleep on a bed. And the support worker they were working with kind of found that a real issue at first and kind of didn't think that was like the right thing. And it took some thinking and kind of reflection to understand that, it's about what the client wants. And then that kind of idea was accepted. And I think that example kind of highlights some of that reflection and sort of challenging of the self that the staff have been doing. The amount of changes that the project has sort of put into place already, some of which Kath mentioned, but as I said, there's a lot more. Some other things, I think that real drive to take on some of the recommendations, like the sort of inclusion and gender informed work stuff, which again Kath's mentioned, is really admirable. And again, I'd love to talk about that more in other forums going forward. And things that are very important now, more than ever, in light of the pandemic, like digital inclusion. I know that there's been a lot more work on what they'd already done, on top of what they'd already done on digital inclusion. And I think I've seen something about clients getting iPads now, that kind of thing. So again, there's a lot I could talk about here, but really that drive to reflect, challenge themselves, and the sheer eagerness with which they've decided to build on what they're already doing.
Absolutely, and I certainly saw that reflected in the discussions when Kath met the panel, and I think we want to, as Cymorth, obviously we want people to kind of meet the standards outlined in the principles and the accreditation process, but we also want this to be a supportive learning process that kind of works alongside the projects that are undertaking it in order to kind of do that continual improvement. And something that I was less involved than Alex in the process, but something that was really clear to me was that kind of commitment to continual learning from Kath as the kind of leader of that project, kind of never shying away from having a conversation about different elements that maybe there could be additional work done, and always kind of ready to roll up the sleeves, think about new ideas, embrace those in a really positive way. And I think it's fair to say in the kind of middle of the process, once Alex has done the interviews and gone through all the policies and procedures, there's a kind of recommendations report that takes midway through that process, and none of those were recommendations that were required in order to get the accreditation. They were just building on the kind of good work that was there, and identifying other additional things that could make the project even better. But the willingness and the openness from Kath and the team to really embrace that, and the passion, because this is all about the people using Housing First services, and the passion that Kath showed in terms of let's do more. Okay, we're at the standard, that's great, but let's continually learn and develop more so that the people that we're supporting get the very, very best experience and outcomes. So yeah, that was something that really struck me during that process. So I guess last question before we finish, probably to Kath and then to Alex, is what would your message be if to anyone who's thinking about maybe going through the accreditation process, is a bit kind of, not sure about taking this on, what would your message be, Kath, to any projects that are thinking about it?
I hope that it's come across in what how I shared with you guys today, but I would just say absolutely give it a go, and give it your all, because for us, as you said, Kate, we were already doing things pretty well in most areas, but it was so enlightening to actually see those spaces created for growth, and then to go back to reflect, to talk to the team, and really start to think about how we're good, but how can we be better? What can we do more of? How can we really embrace what's being offered by Cymorth and the suggestions that have come to us from Alex, from the panel as well. So yeah, it was just a really brilliant and exciting opportunity for us. Alex and the staff that he worked with at Cymorth as well were just incredibly compassionate and kind towards our clients who were happy to be interviewed as part of the process. Also, having kind of spoken and reflected with my team members, Alex, who took part in the process, they found it really, really positive, really enlightening, and really validating as well for somebody to actually come along, be curious about what we're delivering, and ultimately to be accredited for what we're delivering has just been such a boost for us, coming out of what has been a really, really challenging year for everyone in the sector, everyone in the world, really. So yeah, I think this has come at an amazing time. So all I can say is go for it. If you're delivering a service and you want to know what's going well and what could be better, absolutely, I think it's a brilliant process to take part in.
Thanks very much, Kath. And Alex, from the perspective of the person kind of conducting it, and I guess planning for what might be future accreditations over the next year or two, what would your message be?
I'd echo the stuff Kath said. What I would add, read the reports, obviously the Conwy Denbighshire report, the follow-up report, and the Salvation Army Cardiff report we published today, because you'll see things, you'll see the way that we discuss the principles and the kind of examples we highlight. Also, you'll see in the kind of things that go into the recommendations, which I would emphasize in both reports, have also included things like, you're doing this well, so continue to do it. So it's not just about, oh, here are some things you want to think about. It's a case of, I mean, Kath used the word validating, and I'm really pleased to hear that her staff found those interview processes validating. And again, it's about validating the good work that's done. And just to, talk to me. I've got lots of documents. I can answer questions. I'm sure that Kath, and I know Sue would be happy to sort of chat to people who are thinking about going through the accreditation. I kind of assume there, but I think I saw Kath nodding. I do ask quite a lot of Kath, I must say. So big thanks from me again. But so just talk to me. Talk to people who've been through it. Look at the documents, and remember that it's not about being a perfect Housing First project. That's not how you get the accreditation. It's mainly about showing that you're willing to do the work on the journey to being perfect. So,
Thanks very much, Alex. And of course, for those of you who are not members of the Housing First Wales network, please do, get in touch with Cymorth, get yourself added to the mailing list for that. They're really useful meetings. Kath is our new chair, which we're delighted about, but a real opportunity to hear best practice, hear from different speakers, but also a really open and honest space for people to raise issues and collectively come up with solutions, because, as Yvonne hinted, there's always barriers kind of in the row and hurdles that you need to kind of get over at various points. And the Housing First Network group is a really supportive group to help people to make that continuous improvement and learning. Thank you so much, everyone. A huge thank you to Alex for leading this accreditation process. Huge congratulations to Kath, your team, Yvonne, for gaining the accreditation. Absolutely fantastic news. I'm really pleased the Minister could be here today to award it to you. We're going to take a 15-minute break now, but we'll be back at 11:15, where we'll be hearing from Housing First across the nation. So we'll be hearing from Alex Smith from Homeless Link, who leads on Housing First in England, and Claire Frew, who leads on Housing First for Homeless Network Scotland. So we'll be hearing about Housing First, how it's developing in those nations in their particular context. So please do come back for that and get your questions ready for that panel. Look forward to seeing you at 11:15. Diolch yn fawr iawn. See you in a minute.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.